Hey guys, this is Corey Stanley, Navionics Technical Specialist for Texas, Louisiana, and Oklahoma. Let's go ahead and get started with the webinar. I know we still have some more people signing on. Tonight's webinar is going to be over locating bass in the grass. My two home lakes, Sam Rayburn and Toledo Bend, obviously known across the country for how well you can, fish the grass, especially in the summertime, fall. The way we're going to kind of be talking about today, I'm not going to do much as far as deep grass cranking, more of a frogging, flipping, and just real heavy cover, tight quarters type stuff. We'll look at a few images here and there on, the type of grass I look for, or the little subtleties you look for in the grass. We'll also spend a little bit of time and go over, some of the tackle that I use as far as rod, reel, line, that sort of thing. But first and foremost, I like to get all my webinars, I like to start out with a sonar chart moment. And for those of you kind of new to the Navionics world, the sonar chart layer is basically where users or any updates to the Navionics mapping is going. A lot of it is users that are fishing or actually recording and updating charts as they fish, which kind of helps everyone. We'll look at a couple places. Here you can see Sam Rayburn, Toledo Bend, a couple pretty good places that you really can show an example of how much the sonar chart layer has helped mapping. If I turn it off and go to Navionics, I'm just on the Navionics web app, which is free. This thing it's updated instantly. This is basically you're viewing the Navionics database of what's available mapping wise. So as you can see here on Toledo Bend, this is Sandy Creek Flats. As you can see, there's just huge blank spots. And this was when we were at the Bassmaster Classic in Houston. This was one of the #1 questions we were asked: is why, when I'm fishing on Toledo Bend, is there huge just blank spots where you can see mapping goes right up to the line and then it stops. And it's actually available if you have an updated card. And so kind of the backstory on why, as you can see, it's perfect cut lines. Years ago, some of you probably remember Navionics was partnered with, they have this hotspot. So you have Navionics hotspots map, not to be confused with the now hot maps. And Navionics kind of discovered the partnership kind of went south. Some of the data wasn't accurate. So when they split, some of the data that's gone is the stuff that the hotspots folks were actually providing. So that's why it's perfect cut lines. But if you go to look, you can kind of see the before. There's these lines. When I go over and hit sonar chart and turn that on and activate it, you can see everywhere in those holes there actually is contours there, and it's all available. You just have to Humminbird, for the most part, it automatically comes on. Lowrance, the first time you plug the card in, you have to go in and physically turn on the sonar chart layer, which you do under chart options and view. You go menu, chart options, go to view, and turn that on. Humminbird Helix units, menu twice, go over to chart, down to chart options, and select either left or right fish and chip card. That's kind of the real quick version of how to turn that on. As you can see, I'll toggle it again. That actually makes a huge difference, when it's off or on. And and a lot of these guys who asked me this in the class, they were just dumbfounded when they seen the potential of the mapping that was available compared to what they were getting by just simply turning a button on. And it's not just here. As you start coming out towards the mouth of 6 Mile, again, you can see you've got just perfect cut lines. There's nothing there. Out on the mouth of 6 Mile Flats, you come in, you activate that layer and turn that on. And the reason is it's on a separate layer is due to the fact that it has to be the only way you can get, like Toledo Bend is a prime example. That lake's full of stumps. So getting a good recording boat in there is not always easy. So the data you're getting from fishermen, it's not Coast Guard gathered data or certified data through an official recording boat. So that's why it has to be put, for legal reasons, be put on a separate layer. The good thing is once you turn that layer on the first time, it's always on. So you don't have to go back and forth, turn it on every time you power the unit up. We'll actually be looking again at some of these spots here and kind of give you an idea. Granted, there's not grass there. They have a lot of water fluctuation for any of you guys who may fish Toledo Bend, but I'll go over some stuff that, that I look for when I'm, flipping grass, throwing a frog, depending on time of year. I've got a few screenshots of some underwater stuff there. to me, grass edges, and for the most part, what we're going to be talking about tonight is Hydrilla. Hydrilla is, it's very thick. It creates an awesome canopy for these fish. It filters the water, makes it crystal clear, which is why for years, up until this year, that a lot of the grass is gone because of water fluctuation. Toledo Bend has just been, the clarity is great. The sight fishing's been good. That's what helped Toledo Bend earn its #1, ranking through BASS for a few years there, was the healthiness of the water due to the grass. And to me, there's no more fun. I mean, it's a grind, but there's no more fun way to me than to take a big jig and flip it down through Hydrilla. A 1 ounce. I like to use either a Strike King Hack Attack jig or an Oldham's IMAX jig. It has a cool little screw lock on the back. You don't go through trailers like crazy. But when I approach a new lake, and prime example is I was flipping grass. I guess this was back in the late 2000s. We were catching a lot of fish flipping grass on Rayburn, Toledo. The BFL regional that year was on Lake Ouachita. Lake Ouachita is a lot clearer lake, so that grass was a lot deeper, but it kind of suited the style of fishing. There was guys going up the river, but there was also opportunities to go flip grass, and it was no different there. How you approach it, just a little bit different depths, depending on time of year. So we all know that fish are a lot real similar to deer. So like a deer on a clear cut, they're going to travel the edges of it. They're not going to be, they will cross the middle of it, but for security reasons, especially once they get a little pressure on them, those deer, they hug the sides of those, where the standing timber is compared to a clear cut. Well, bass are no different. They're going to travel in and out on those, the edges. Then that grass that follows contours is even better. You have a good. They can be in deep water real quickly, and so like, obviously these fish are going to be, we'll use this, let's see. Trying to find like a textbook drain real quick and we'll go over. All right, here's a good one right here. You can kind of see how this drain funnels up into here. So when these fish spawn, February, they're going to be hanging out here in this deeper water. They're going to move up here to spawn, and as they move out, now we're starting to get summertime. May, they did the hill shad spawn thing, and at least on the south end. Now, on the down south, now they're starting to move out. So they're traveling along. I hope you guys can see my cursor. They're traveling along these edges, like a highway. It's kind of how they treat them. So as they start getting closer to deep water, and this Hydrilla is starting to peak out, you're going to look for it. Like here, you've got a deep water real close by where you've got a point, 2 points right here with an indention. Anytime that Hydrilla is good matted in those indentions or on those points, that's the kind of stuff you're going to want to, flip. I approach it with one of those. I use my electronics. I look for those edges, but it's also a trial and error. Once you start going down the edges, if you can't visibly see it, which is the way I like it most, flipping a mat that's right up on top of the water is a lot of fun. But when you can go down an underwater grass line that not everybody can, has the patience of doing, to me, those fish get a lot less pressure. So if you can be in that, my magic number here is if I can be in that, my boat's in 6 to 8 foot, I'm flipping into, 5 to 8 foot, or even, my boat's in 10 to 12 and I'm flipping, but kind of my minimum in the summer is I want to be that grass to be in 5 to 8 foot of water. The deeper the better, but that's kind of ideal, it's minimum. So you're going to be coming down, and it's kind of a trial and error. You're going to flip straight out into the grass, and then you're going to work your way. What I like to do is, if I'm facing the front of my boat, I'm going to look to my left at about say 9 o'clock, and I'm going to start flipping there. And I'm going to start working my way back to 12 to see where that grass edge is. And once you kind of figure that out, you can kind of, what edges you're looking for, moving down those grass lines. And it's no different than, I'll say, offshore cranking. You want to see those little subtleties, those little points, those little indentions, holes in it. That's what you're going to look for. And we'll go look at a couple of pictures of that now. So here's a good example of, here, we'll actually go here. So this is just a bare bottom. Everybody see this picture okay? Make it a little bigger. All right, here's a good example of a good thick hydrilla edge. So you can kind of see you got just a bare bottom out and a little bit of structure to your right. Again, we're in 5 foot of water. And then to the left, it's a little shallow around light, but you can kind of see there's a few fish hanging on these edges right here. You got a good thick line, and you got these little patches of hydrilla stacked out to the left with isolated fish out in front of them. So that's where I like to go down that with my side scan. I'll go down it, find those edges, then I would backtrack back up and go down that edge, flipping in, flipping out, flip 2 foot into the mat, flip, try to hit that outside edge. And I go back and forth, and the biggest thing is getting that first bite. Once you get that first bite, it'll kind of let you know, all right, I caught that fish on the inside edge of the grass, 2 foot into the hydrilla. So let me start doing that. And once you start doing it, it becomes a pattern. But just learning those grass edges. Here's another one that's just solid mats, and this one you've actually got some rock on the right hand side. But if you look on the left hand side, it's just a solid mat. And this one here is pretty cool because you can actually see fish up in the mat. Right here where the cursor is, with a little hand, you can see 3 fish hanging out right there in that mat. And as you can see, they're kind of on the back side of a little indention. So prime example here, these fish aren't on the edge, they're up in the mat 2 or 3 feet. So that's kind of clues you in. So now when you back up and go down this grass mat, you're actually going to be flipping up into the grass, not so much on the outside edges, because this one, it's not as too thick to where you can actually see how those fish are relating ahead of time. Again, on a good contour line. Now here's another prime example that's what you really want to key on as you're going down it. You see on your side scan, it makes a big point. You back up and you want to hit those. You've also got standing timber out in front because you can kind of see from the shadow of your side scan. You're going to want to hit these these points. Anything that's a little bit different, a little irregularities. You got to kind of think with grass just as you would offshore structure. You want to look for the points, the humps, the things that are different. I mean, it's almost impossible if you're on a lake that the entire bank line is all the way around is covered with hydrilla. It's tough to just put your trolling motor down and go fishing. You want to look for those drains, the stuff that's real close to deep water. Something different. I mean, it's needle in a haystack if you're just fishing all the same stuff. And here's a good little example of how it actually breaks it down. It shows you, your side scan. This is the case. You're on a flat. You're actually in a little drain going through, and you've got grass on both sides of the boat. You can see you're kind of shallow, working deep. You're going out here to a deeper, a drop off. There's fish hanging in the edges of this grass on this secondary point right here of the grass. That's kind of the stuff that you can allow you to break it down and maximize your time. If not, you're just, needle in a haystack looking for grass, which can be a little intimidating. I mean, it's not always super easy. And here's kind of a breakdown that I'd found, when I went back and circled some of the 3 fish I was telling you in the grass. You see how, like here, you've got like a little indentation, a little bare spot that runs through it. Those fish like to hang on those bare spots. There's 2 small fish in the middle of that. There's a patch out in front of it. And here's kind of this grass isn't really, so this grass is on a hump, so it's, you would more crank this, but I just kind of want to give an example on down imaging. When your down imaging is set correctly, you can actually tell how far off the bottom of the grass comes, if there's a canopy. This here is more of a Carolina rig type grass. I couldn't find a good example, of a good canopy with down imaging, but this is kind of gives you an idea, this is hump with grass on it. And so one of those times you really should use your electronics. Again, going back to the map, of those. So here you got a deep hole like an old pond that's here, and you got a drain that comes up through this creek bend. So when you're scanning up through this, like the one I showed you earlier, where you can see grass on both sides of the boat, it was a typical spot like this, where this thing necks down, you got a shallow flat on either side, so you can actually use your imaging to see where the grass is, where the grass is and where it isn't, so you're not just trying to fish finding grass. A lot of people don't use side imaging when they're up shallow. Me, I think it's a good tool because of the fact of, like, prime example, I love flipping grass. So you can maximize your time. And so you just, welling away, picking up different stuff, idle through these areas before you flip them and turn around and go back through them. You know, and I'm the type too, like I said, if I go down that thing one time with a big jig, catch a few fish, go by it, they don't bite again, go back through, switch it out, go to a 7-inch worm, you know, on a 1/2 ounce weight, flip that in there. If I'm flipping really thick grass, typically I never go to anything but braid. If your braid's kind of faded, I'll kind of go back with a marker, you know, 7-8 feet up the line, color that in real good. You know, especially on lakes like Toledo Bend and Sam Rayburn, I get a lot of pressure. Okay, and I'll kind of move over here into some stuff that's in the, you know, once I start getting later into the summer, say your July, August, you know, I'm going to be able to look more main lake. There's a lot more oxygen in that water just for, you know, boat traffic, waves. You know, so if you can find main lake grass, you know, that's where a lot of your big fish, you know, if they're not going to hold an offshore structure. Here, this is 6 Mile Flats. Several years ago, you know, all this out here was loaded with hydrilla. So you could actually stop and fish the deep points, but then work your way in, and you could find a hydrilla right on these drops. So, I mean, that was your boat's out here. You know, you're at this situation sets you up to where your boat was in 15 to 18 foot of water, and you're flipping up to 10 and 12. You know, prime example, you got a bridge in this little where a creek comes through, and you got a point right before. I mean, that's a prime thing to what you're looking for when you're trying to flip grass. You know, and look for, you know, find big fish in the grass, because typically flipping is not something you're going to get 20 bites a day unless they're just really chewing. It's one of those things I pick up. I'm looking for, you know, 7 to 10 bites a day on a really good day, or sometimes it's 5 to 6 bites a day, and you really have to, you know, capitalize on it. You can see like this point coming in, and then you would follow it in, you know, until either side of that creek until you find that grass, and then go back. You know, in times like here, you keep depth all the way to the bank here. I mean, you got a second bridge, you're in 16, 17 foot of water, the bridge is in 12, and you're going to just keep looking. I mean, that, like a little points going into it. Anything that's different that can be holding fish. All right, before we go any further, before we start talking tackle and you know, different stuff that I use, does anyone have any questions over, you know, breaking down a map, you know, what grass may look like, go back over any of the images, any of that stuff? If you do, go down to the chat, you know, type in your questions. I'll cover those real quick before we move on. All right, we'll move on from there then. All right, let's go look over my rods, my rod selection that I use. And this is Luz's website. You know, the way Luz's rods are set up, it makes it super easy for you to, you know, go through and look to what you're looking for, the way their descriptions are. So what I like to use, I like this Luz custom light speed stick. They start at 159, but you go into them, you know, and you see all the warranty stuff. They have a non-slip wing grip handle, and then you go down here and pick your model. So what I'm looking for, I want anything from a 7.6 to an 8 foot rod. You know, something that when I flip in, you know, a very, very heavy action with a super fast tip. Something that when that fish hits it, you need to turn that fish quickly. You don't want to let it swim, get hung up in grass, you'll never get it out. So my number one choice on this is the Magnum Flipping Rod. Just right here, you can see it's good, 15 to 65 pound line, 3/16 to 2 ounce weight. A lot of those kind of things right like that descriptions are really overrated. You know, as far as a lot of rod companies, the guys who design these rods for Luz, those are pretty spot on. You know, I was very skeptical, you know, when I first went to some of their products, but then, and the more I learned them, the more I realized, hey, those actions and the weight recommendations are really spot on. If I go down to say you know, a 1/2 ounce weight on a 7-inch worm, I'll go down to this Magnum pitching rod, and basically it's the exact same action. It's just you know, it's 2 inches shorter, a little easier to handle. You know, it's something I prefer. And that Magnum pitching rod is also the rod that I use to throw a hollow body frog on. it allows you, so there's enough tip on it. And even though it looks like the exact same rod, I mean, heavy, you wouldn't think 2 inches makes a difference. That 7.4 actually has a little bit more tip to it, so at least allows me to even skip a frog, make long casts with it, and recover line quickly. If I'm now like a ribbit style bait, a frog that it's a little bit lighter, I'm gonna be doing a lot of casting and reeling. I use this Magnum Grass Rod, so it's 7.2, so it's a little shorter, still that heavy with a fast tip. The rod's got just a little bit of tip to it, so like a light, you're throwing a ribbit or a horny toad that's, just a hook with no weight on it, which I like to do because if you can get by. Now a ribbit, I use a 16th ounce shrew-in weight, an old bullet weight. That way if I come to a hole, because typically if I'm throwing a ribbit, it's going to be choppier water, something with a ripple to it. So when I come to a hole, I may not get a bite, I drop it, almost let it just nosedive into it, pick it back up, catch a ton of fish doing that. Or, one blows up, misses it, throw back in there, reel it to the spot, drop it, let it fall down, almost like you're throwing it like a fluke or something. Whereas when I throw a horny toad, the only time I throw a horny toad, it is glass, because it's a little bit more subtle. So the water slick as glass. I'm making a long cast with it on a hook, a 6/0 beast hook with no weight to it. So when you go to that no weight thing, that 7.2 with a little bit of tip really allows you to make a long cast with it. Those are basically the 3 rods I stick with when we're talking grass fishing. And now as far as reels go, so my number one choice on reel that Lew's has it right now is this Team Lew's Custom Pro Speed Spool. Anytime I'm grass fishing, obviously I've got 65 or 80 pound braid depending on depth. I'm going to use an 8-to-1 gear ratio reel, which you can see here. Lew's has an 8-3-to-1. I like it. The reel's compact, but it allows me to make long casts. With that 8-to-1 gear ratio reel, you flip in and you see that line jump. Typically, that line jumped and that fish is taken off. It allows you to winch down, pick up a lot of line in a hurry, set the hook, and then also the drag. I keep it winched down as tight as I can go. It brings in 33 inches of line per rotation. It really allows you to crank those fish out of that heavy cover. Whether I'm throwing a frog, whether I'm throwing, a hollow body, a swimming type frog, a tackle, or if I'm throwing if I'm flipping, that's kind of my choice, as far as reels. That's, my preference. Now, as far as line, I don't have that pulled up. I typically stick to either 60 or 80 pound Sunline FX2 frogging and flipping braid. I like either the dark green or the blue green. Typically when I'm fishing grass, I never go to fluorocarbon. There's times when I'm flipping bushes that I'll go from fluorocarbon to braid, from braid to fluorocarbon if I feel like those fish are finicky or if the water is super clear. But I feel like with grass that it doesn't make as big a difference because it's kind of blending into now granted, I'm not going to use a real, bright braid. And if I'm running into issues like my braid is getting frayed or, get how some braid, when it gets old, it turns white. My tip there is to take a black Sharpie. And I like to take a pocket knife and cut a V into it and then put your line in it and do 6 to 8 foot of that line with a Sharpie so that it helps it blend into that grass. We talked a lot about, areas I look to flip. When I'm throwing a frog, it's not a whole lot different. Now, I will say that Rayburn pleated bend is not like a Lake Gunnersville where you see them throwing a frog or just thick matted Hydrilla. They come up through and eat it. There's times they will, but not like that. You run into you have a different type of grass. My favorite grass to throw a frog in, we call pepper grass. It's a long brown leafy grass. Typically, it'll grow in just big patches like the size of your boat, and it gets super, super thick. So you can kind of comb through it with it. But I have a patch the size of your boat. There's times there's 3, 4, 5, 6 fish in it because back in summertime, just like when they're deep, those fish will group up. Kind of something I didn't cover as well when I'm flipping grass. I always keep a marker buoy with me up on the front deck ready to go. And if I catch a fish out of the grass, I try to throw that marker buoy exactly where I just caught that fish. Because I don't know if some of you have heard of it, but basically a lot of people refer to them as a scrape, especially in Texas, where those fish will be 5, 6, 7 deep, a fish in one little hole in the grass because there's something there. Either it's there's a big stump down there, there's bait fish, there's perch, there's an indention in the grass, something special about that little stretch. There's been times I've flipped in, caught a fish, kicked it, and I'll have it where I can just kick it over to give you a bearing on where you just caught that fish from. Turn around, flip right back in, and catch another, 4 or 5 pounder just that quick. Because even when they're stacked up like that, they get very competitive. So they hit it and they're gone. Again, which is where that 8-to-1 gear ratio reel comes in handy, because you can really just winch those fish out of the grass. So back to the frogging on the pepper grass. So the thing I'm looking for on the pepper grass, typically that stuff grows a lot on, on points, shallow points, sandy points. So again, we are in housing. You got this drain that comes out, kind of spins. It goes up through here. So this point right here by these islands, that's the typical stuff that pepper grass gets super thick on. And I will say that if the pepper grass is choked out by Hydrilla, I've never done real well doing that. It's always been you need clear water underneath it, and it just serves a good canopy for when it's hot. It keeps those fish nice and cool, and it attracts perch like crazy. So especially if you pull up to one of those stretches, and you can hear those fish just like perch, just like in pads. You can hear them just popping, just the bottom side of that grass, and it's them just making that noise. Those bass are keying in on that. I mean, they hear that noise. That's what they want to eat. Even if they're eating shad at the time, it's a shad spawn. If those perch are loaded underneath the grass mat, there will be bass around them. So that instance, a lot of times with that real thick stuff like that, I'll even go to an 80-pound braid on my frog, because that stuff can get super, super thick. Even when I'm throwing a frog on it, that stuff's so thick you can't follow up with like a fluke or a weightless Cinco when one misses the frog, I think, in open water. So you're going to want to look at going something like I'll have a 1/2 ounce, like beaver style bait with a 1/2 ounce weight rigged up. One misses it, I'll reach down and flip back in there, because that stuff's super thick as well. Something you can really get that fish moving with. That kind of covers most of the stuff I was planning to talk about. Again, before we go any further, does anybody have any questions or anything you want me to talk about while we've got you? It's a pretty straight, simple topic on finding bass in the grass, especially when we're talking shallow grass, which is kind of what I wanted to focus on here. There will be more than likely a follow-up for fishing deep grass, throwing a big crankbait Carolina rig on grass that's not as thick, but in deeper water. If anybody has any questions, go down to the bottom. There's the chat on the dashboard thing. Type away, and I'll do my best to answer them. All right, guys, if we don't have any questions, I guess that'll conclude tonight's webinar. I greatly appreciate all of you attending. If for some reason you signed on, but you were able to had to step away or something, this thing will be recorded and saved on the Navionics website. I can show you guys where, if you go to navionics.com, show you real quick where those things are typically stored. Oh, and something else for this month. While I've got you guys, the Platinum card is actually on sale for $30 off for this month. Something you need to take advantage of, because brand new out, we have the sonar chart shading that is only available on the Platinum or Platinum Plus cards. And what it does, it takes aerial overlays and allows you to really outline those creek channels, makes them really stand out. I mean, you can do some kind of depth shading along with laying your contours on top to really be able to follow those things out. Anyway, on the webinars, you go down here at the bottom where it says blog, you can see webinars, and it gives you, a list of everything that's going on. And you'll see, recent posts, and it gives you an opportunity to go down here and typically watch any webinar, and there's tons of them on here. You can kind of go through and look at them. Go to webinar, And there's just webinar after webinar that goes back several years that, you know, you can really get lost in just tons of different content, some really knowledgeable guys. Okay, guys, I see some of you have typed under the questions. I'm trying to get it to pull down. For some reason, it's not showing up. Here we go. All right, let's go back through these. So Tim asked, how do I decide which creeks to concentrate on? So in the summertime, I'm going to look more main lake stuff. You know, the more main lake, the better, in my opinion. So I'm going to start, like, so if you go into like a big feeder creek, like going back to, let's see, let me go back to the chart viewer, and I'll kind of show you what I look for. So say Sam River in here, for example. So in the summertime, I don't focus as much on these smaller creeks. I'm going to look at, like say, Beach Basin, prime example. All right, you're going to look at a huge, you know, area, big pocket like that, and you see all these main feeder creeks off of it. So as you come in here, looking at all these, this creek has the deepest water in the entire, you know, that entire big area. You see the white coming in. I'm going to start there, looking at the stuff that's close to deep water as I possibly can, and then work my way in, and just kind of, then it's kind of trial and, they're trying to trial and error as far as, you know, where those fish are holding at. You figure out, all right, as you're going in, you see these points on the left and right. All right, they're on point. Let's bounce those points. All right, they're in the middle of a drain, you know, going in towards the bank. Let's, you know, hit that. That's kind of how I do it. Flipping grass, there is some trial and error. Mario asked, on my home lake, there's a lot of submerged hay grass that is really strong. How would you approach that? So there's a ton of hay grass on River and Toledo as well. Again, I don't use a jig as much on it, but I'll use a 1 ounce weight and say a beaver style bait. And you can actually they'll move into that stuff on their way in to spawn in February. And you can actually, I mean, we've caught some really big fish doing that, flipping a beaver in that stuff. You know, if it's submerged way underneath the water, that stuff, throwing a swim jig over the top of it or a big swim bait can be awesome too. Will the sonar shading work on a Humminbird Solix or Helix? It does. So my current boat, I have a Helix, a Solix 15 at the dash and 2 Helix 12s up front, and it will work on both. A tip from Stanley Sayers says he downloaded the fish reveal, and the screen shows the fish grass and everything else is brown. Okay. So yeah, that sounds more like a Lowrance issue as far as you're talking about. You download the fish reveal, now it's showing a different image. I'm not as familiar with the fish reveal. Like I said, my personal boat, I have Humminbird units. I do know enough about the mapping on a Lowrance unit, but I'm not familiar with what you're talking about. You may hit up with if you go look at Josh Douglas Fishing, guy is super sharp, probably the best I know is with a Lowrance. That's probably something he can answer off the top of his head. Does anybody else have any other questions? Okay, so Mario asked how to get it to work on the Helix. So you have to go, I'm trying to do this off memory. I don't have my unit booted up, but you have to go to your overlays. Well, not the overlays, I'm sorry. You go to your, I can't think of the name of it now, to where you can see your aerial overlay. I'm sorry, I went blank there. Go to your aerial overlay, select land and water. I think you have to put the map sort, the chart select in auto, and then you'll see all your aerial overlays. Then when you go to transparency, the more you do the transparency up and down, the more you can see your contour lines of your typical Navionics mapping over the top of it. Check that out and see if that works for you. And then if it doesn't, my email is cstanley@navionics.com, which you're going to get an email thanking you for attending the webinar. If that doesn't work, if you need some more information on that, feel free to reach out. My Facebook is just Corey Stanley, Corey Stanley. Feel free to reach out to me there any way I can help, man. I do appreciate everyone attending. Hopefully this helps. I'll have another one in a few, coming out in a few months. Anytime any of you guys have any requests on something, a topic to do these over, feel free to reach out. Be happy to work something up. Thanks again for everyone attending, and that will conclude tonight's webinar.